Hi, my name is Charlie Kimbell, and I'm the state representative for Windsor-5, which is Woodstock, Reading, and Plymouth. And I'm running for re-election in 2020, but I have the benefit of being unopposed. So I'm not really campaigning. I'm not asking for your vote today, although I do hope you vote for me. But to really give you a recap of what happened in the 2020 legislative session and to look forward to what's going to happen in 2021. So that's typically what I'd like to do. I have notes, I'm going to use them. So the first thing is, in a typical session for the legislature, we start in January, in the first week of January, and we meet every week, Tuesday through Friday, full-time, until we pass a budget. And that's usually in late May or early June. But this was not a typical legislative session. I'll get to that detail. It's also the second year in a biennium, which means anything that was proposed or discussed in the previous year but didn't pass is still live and could be taken up and then passed in this legislative year. And we did that. So the first two signature bills that really happened in the legislature this year was, the first was to establish a paid family leave insurance program. And that was passed in January by a pretty overwhelming majority in the House and the Senate. So that bill was approved. It went to the governor's office for a signature, and he vetoed the bill. So we had a chance to override the governor's veto, and in the House it failed by one vote. We had 99 votes, we needed 100. The second was an increase in the minimum wage from its current $10.96 an hour to $11.75 an hour for January 1st. That passed both the House and the Senate, went to the governor for a signature, and he vetoed the bill. That then came back to the House for an override, and it passed by a vote of 100 to 49. So it was right on the edge. So the legislature continued to work on, after that, on its normal workings. Everything was in committee. We had the Forestry Committee dealing with forest issues. Act 250 was going through, judicial reform. And then right about mid-March, there was, the pandemic became more of an issue, and we knew that we were looking at the possibility of an executive order to shut down gatherings. So on March 13th, we passed some emergency legislation that would enable different agencies and regulatory bodies to really loosen up their regulations so that people could deal with the pandemic. And we passed that legislation on March 13th, and then the governor issued his executive order limiting gathering sizes. So the legislature went home. We had no budget, we had no tax policy, we had a health crisis, we didn't know how that was going to come out, and we had really no idea of what the economic impact was going to be. But we couldn't stay in session, so we left. So over the next 11 days, and the governor issued a series of executive orders that expanded that emergency order and basically shut down the economy. And then we were dealing with our constituents with all sorts of questions, like, am I an essential business? Am I an essential employee? When can I open? What do I have for aid coming in for unemployment insurance? Is there something I can get for my business to help me keep afloat? So there's all the questions of very uncertain time that was going through. And we knew we had to get back to convene as a body, but we couldn't come back to Montpelier. So we had to figure that out. And we did. The leadership of the House and the Senate figured out a way to use Zoom and also a phone app called Everbridge so that we could convene and discuss and vote securely in order to conduct the people's business. So we started to do that in April and took up what was primarily issues and bills that were related to COVID-19. The biggest thing was $1.25 billion in money coming from the federal government in the CARES Act, and how to allocate that to meet the most needs and the most pressing needs of the people in the state. So we had to figure out how we could use that money. We knew we had to use it by December 30th. Anything not used by December 30th, we had to send back to the federal government. We also knew that it could only be used for COVID-related expenses or impacts of COVID-19. So we had to figure that. And also, it couldn't be for any pre-scheduled activities. It had to be something new. So with that, we started to make allocations of that money, and we allocated most of it except for about $300 million, knowing that the rules from the US Treasury might change and we could come back. So that we also passed a 3-month budget that took us through July, August, and September. because we didn't know yet what the revenues of the state would look like. We didn't know what the economic impact really would be. So then we moved forward and passed that budget, passed some other legislation, and then got out of Montpelier, or got out of our virtual Montpelier at the end of June, knowing that we'd have to come back. So then we did come back August 25th to then consider what else we could do with the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and then to take up a brand new budget that would have to pass in the span of 4 weeks, which is an incredibly difficult task to go through a $7.1 billion budget and all the committees that would be contributing to it. So we did that in a 4-week period, and also then passed other legislation which is very large. We passed how to tax and regulate the legalization of marijuana, how to look at the Global Warming Solutions Act, looking at the Justice Reinvestment Act, looking at migratory birds, and even bills on tree wardens. So there was considerable legislation that was passed in that 1 month time to really help. And we allocated the rest of the remaining money from the Coronavirus Relief Fund. So the governor did also veto the Global Warming Solutions Act, and the legislature convened and overrode his veto on that legislation as well. So in this historic legislative session, which is the longest in the state's history, we passed significant legislation and passed essentially 3 different budgets during that time period. So it was a significant amount of work that we actually went through. So what's on the docket for 2021? We'll be looking at Act 250 reform, because that was another bill that came and was vetoed by the governor because he didn't like a couple of the things that were in the bill. So, and that's reforming the process of administering a very important land use law. Another is we're going to be looking at the Vermont State College system, which was kept afloat this year, as well as the University of Vermont, with $80 million from the coronavirus relief funds. So we'll be looking at how to structure that to be sustainable on an ongoing basis. We'll be looking at how to better align our career and technical education centers with the state college curriculum, and that will happen throughout the session. We also have the Tax Structure Commission report coming out on January 15th of 2021, which really looks at the overall tax structure for the state, including property taxes, rooms and meals taxes, sales taxes, all the different things that we pay, to try to see if there's ways that can make it more equitable, more progressive, but also so that we're not taxing people out of their homes and taxing people out of the state. So that's going to be happening in January of 2021. There are many, many issues, especially then dealing with the COVID, the lasting impacts of the COVID pandemic. We don't know exactly what that means yet, but we are going to be dealing with that issue. And last is trying to heal this divide that has really come across us politically, socially, and culturally. And I realized that over the last few days as to how widespread that was, when we found that there was also racial epithets and sexual discrimination notes that were left in shelters along the Long Trail, in logbooks, on stones, on access ramps where fishing boats would put in. So this is around the entire state, and we're better than that. Vermonters can come together and really create a better future for ourselves and one another. Thank you, and if you have any questions or information for me, I'd love to see it. And call me on my cell phone. I'm at 802-296-1276. This is Charlie Kimbell from Woodstock, Vermont. Thank you.